Morning, Stephen. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, sound good.
Awesome, thanks.
Hey, Stephen, this is Paul. Just wanted to do a quick check myself.
Yep, you sound good, Paul.
Thank you.
Morning, Stephen. Just doing a mic check.
Yep, you sound good, John.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the final day of the Mid-Atlantic Council meeting here in Dewey Beach. Normally, I'm always under the gun to get home or to get moving, getting somewhere. 23 minutes from home, so you guys can take all the time you want on your reports today. Mike, you like something to say?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's for those of you who had the opportunity to stay last night and enjoy the festivities put on by Wes and his wife. It was amazing food, amazing company. We could have used a win, but from the Phillies, but there's always next year. You know, it is what it is. But I just think thank you very much, Wes, for your hospitality and for taking care of all of us with such amazing food. So I just wanted to say thanks on behalf of the council. Thank you.
Yeah, excited. It was a very good team event. Elena took care of most of it. Sonny, his wife, his son, even his son came and helped chuck the oysters and stuff. And my brother came and chucked some oysters. The guy that brought the oysters, which grows out here, he even came to help chuck them. So it was a good team effort we had last night.
Thank you.
I'm glad to say for those of you that couldn't make it, if you want to hurry up and run to Dewey Beach, we still have plenty of lobster rolls left. Let's start off with the SSC report. Paul Rigo, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm packing my car now. I'll be headed down shortly for those lobster rolls. You also may regret offering me the opportunity to take as much time as I want, but I will try to be succinct here. The SSC met September 11th and 12th in Baltimore. Next slide, please. All the information is under tab 13. We did cover 8 topics, 3 of which have previously been covered in the meeting thus far. But today I'll be talking about our comments on the 5-year research priorities, summarize a presentation on MRIP and our discussions of that, a number of presentations on offshore wind science, and then some various topics related to our OFL-CV applications. Next slide, please. The SSC had the opportunity to review or provide comments on the 5-year research priorities. And one of the things, of course, we did appreciate not only the new research themes, but also the new prioritization approach for species-specific research. We think that'll be, instrumental. And, provided some just some general comments that the research funded by the councils provides critical short-term needs. Spiny dogfish aging, some squid aging. Those are things that help put the finishing touches and actually provide some critical elements for stock assessments. So those have been instrumental. Then they're also setting the stage for long-term monitoring. Breaking out of the mold and funding a particular study that may serve as a long-term project is difficult for most organizations, and this provides that catalyst kind of money. And then the SSC commented about supporting both social and economic research to guide decisions, and particularly some of the more complex issues related to, say, catch allocation. We did, next slide, please. We did, as part of our normal process of continuously reviewing our methodologies and sort of precedents that we set during the meetings. This was our last meeting of the year, so we did look at the OFL CV document and just wanted to make sure that we are applying it correctly. And since, especially this year, where we've divided the criteria into 2 separate tiers and reduced the number of topic areas from 9 to 6. We commented in particular about the uncertainty and the potential bias of recreational harvest estimates, and noted that they really vary depending upon the degree or the magnitude of recreational harvest relative to commercial harvest. So, of course, bluefish are at the top, and Ocean quahogs, not so much. We also commented on the interim reviews. That is, the specifications that are set for multiple years, but in the interim year, we're often asked to comment on that. And so in general, we don't make recommendations, usually because the data are insufficient to indicate the direction or the magnitude of the changes. And also, we fully recognize that changes are undesirable for everybody, industry, council, science, and so forth. But, as the spiny dogfish example this year illustrates, sometimes these are required, and they can be useful in terms of correcting issues that may arise from either errors in the data or changes in the assumptions that were used to generate the recommendations in the first place. So as a general quality assurance issue, they're useful. This was followed by, next slide, please, a series of presentations, well, a long presentation by John Foster at MRIP, and the SSC had inquired, about the research that's underway, and I know the council has an extreme interest in this as well. So there is a research project now underway, which is looking at the question order on the response accuracy. This is a fairly important topic because, as I'll show, it does have some profound implications for the magnitude of total removals. So, and then the other one is the desired increase of information in a more timely fashion. So they're testing this year with some supplemental money, going from a 2-month wave to a 1-month wave. So the MRIP calibration in 2018, this was incorporated recommendations from the National Academy of Sciences and the results of calibration experiments from the household telephone survey to mail effort surveys. And it also reflected a series of changes in terms of the methodology for angler intercepts. So it was a well-funded, reviewed process, but the continuation of that process is what we're concerned about now, and I'll highlight some of the features of that. But it does sort of highlight the need for continual refinement and improvement. So next slide, please. This pilot study is being conducted now, will be finished at the end of the calendar year. 2025 will be dedicated to the analysis of it, one or more peer reviews, and then finally a recalibration of the estimates. So 2026 will be the first potential implementation of the new information and stock assessments, and of course that will be a transition period if depending on the magnitude of the changes, but the full implementation of that will take place over a number of years, as it did when the 2018 transition of estimates from MRIP did occur. These impacts could be significant, and there will be some issues of sort of mixed currency, so to speak, as we had in the earlier transition period. Next slide, please. The SSC expressed some concerns about the overall response rate in the surveys. This topic came up yesterday in some discussions related to golden tilefish. On the average, I believe the response rate in the effort survey is on the order of 5%. That is 5% of the respondents, 5% of the individuals respond to the mail-in survey. There are some concerns about the ability to support an increased survey frequency in the future. This year, basically, you doubled up the effort survey. The ability to sustain that in the future will depend upon finding extra resources to do that. We noted that fine scale information will always exceed capacity. Everyone would like to know the amount of fishing effort on Labor Day weekend, but that may not be the within the realm of statistically valid estimates. John reported on a number of new methods for using self-reported data, passive cell phone mobility, that is tracking of cell phone numbers and so forth, and then rare events. Each of these, have some downstream effects, and they're, as we know from other societal issues, these aren't simple kinds of things. So it's going to be a trade-off between the value of the information and the complexity of obtaining new information. And finally, we noted that the willingness to undertake these kinds of difficult studies to improve the sciences is sort of something to be admired, I think, because it's clear they're going to take a lot of hits associated with trying to improve the underlying basis for the information. So it's a good effort, good faith effort to be faithful to the science as opposed to taking a simpler way out. Next, we turned our attention to offshore wind. There were a number of 4 projects that were presented. Trisha Perez from ROSA talked about a new integrated database, and it will not only increase the awareness of ongoing work, but avoid some duplication of efforts and help to identify some research gaps. These are valuable. We anticipate it'll be valuable for helping to integrate the ongoing projects and provide future investigators access to raw data and to do further studies. And then we encourage them to sort of develop the data sharing policies in place. As I think Jim Gilmore noted yesterday, this kind of database wasn't available, especially at a regional level for power plant studies. So having something like this is thought to be encouraged. Next slide, please. Was a study by Ming Sun, postdoc at SUNY University, and it does. He was looking at kind of some alternative methods for reviewing the potential impacts of wind farm exclusion zones on not only the estimates of bias and precision of stock assessment indices, but also on the subsequent estimates from the stock assessment models. So we were encouraged by this, and he will be using both design and model-based estimators of abundance estimates. So this may be a useful approach. Next slide, please. You received way back on Tuesday, a summary from Colleen Brust and Heather Genovich about the funding of research in New Jersey, and there are 16 projects funded for a total of $18 million thus far, and they're doing a lot of very novel studies, and also it's useful that is taking a regional approach. It's very hard to do really fine scale work and have it be relevant to the total. So, it takes the value of those studies will come from looking at a somewhat broader perspective rather than the transition of fish across the boundary of a particular area. Next slide, please. Another kind of major review that took place was the Northeast Fisheries Science Center had a review of their 9 existing survey types and then 3 proposed new types. These were reviewed by, I believe, at least 7 reviewers over a 3-day meeting. And so this is the bottom trawl survey, the MARMAP survey, the various longline survey that's done in the Gulf of Maine. And of course, not surprisingly, mobile gear surveys are going to be affected most, but for fixed gear surveys, there'll be a need to consider the vertical lines and the implications for marine mammals as, these alternative sampling gears gain more currency or credibility within the monitoring programs. There will be a variety of calibrations that need to be done in order to translate the new information from within surveys and apply them and set them relevant at levels relevant to the existing bottom trawl survey, for example. So much like the calibration that was necessary as part of the albatross to bigelow transition, these types of studies are going to be kind of essential to help this. Restratification of the surveys is likely, mostly because you need some capacity to respond to reallocation of stations if you've lost access to certain areas. And then finally, a new class of models known as species distribution models, which highlight the methods for summarizing spatial distributions of species will be incorporated. So next slide, please. So under other business, we'd heard some reports about the economic and ecosystem working group, Sarah Geitches's leadership and so forth. One of the topics that did come up that reported yesterday is this, there's generally needs for coordination with some of the other SSCs. So this can occur in a variety of ways. It might be as simple as informal participation in the attendance, but the kind of cross-fertilization, is something I think that can benefit both groups. And as one of the questions yesterday, of course, was how can is there any particular SSCs that stand out with respect to in terms of doing things better or differently. So one of the ways to learn that is to do some additional coordination. The SSC will be participating with the South Atlantic Fishery Management Council in terms of a working group on blue line tilefish. And so that is going to be an ongoing project over the course of the year, particularly as the South Atlantic Council CDAR process that provides an update on blue line tilefish. We did receive some comments on black sea bass, and those were important in the context of sort of defining roles of the SSC in terms of advising on allocation issues. The SSC does not offer policy guidance, but there can be an opportunity to say what kinds of policy decisions are consistent with the underlying science that's used to generate the overall ABC in the first place. So I'm sure this topic will engender some further discussion here. And then finally, I just wanted to acknowledge the retirement of Dr. Ed Hood and Dave Secor from the SSC. Ed is, both these scientists have graced the SSC with enthusiastic participation, sound scholarship, and a great deal of wisdom. Dave, understood that you really need to understand the species and its life history in stock assessment. So he was very provide sound counsel on that. And then Ed Hood was a member of the SSC from nearly its inception. He provided, not only valuable historical perspectives, but he had an ungodly wealth of worldwide experience and a remarkable command of not only the recent but the historic scientific literature. So we'll miss their counsel and wisdom. So with that, I'm all done, Mr. Chair, and happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Anna.
Thank you, Paul. And I always try and listen into the SSC discussions, and I always find them very enlightening and informative. Particularly in this meeting, I enjoyed the last sort of ad hoc discussion that you guys had around that black sea bass question. And amongst many of the topics that you guys covered in a very short period of time was a sort of a discussion on a potential white paper on emerging problems and equity issues of concern. And that really encompasses quite a few different discussions that you guys had during that time. But I did hear you guys very clearly when you sort of said that the SSC really fulfills a very small portion of the scientific review that you guys are capable of. And, one example that you guys brought up was that as a council, we really haven't asked the SSC to weigh in on the scientific implications of setting OFLs and ABCs by sector, as we're going to be discussing sector separation potentially on some of our species and a whole host of different topics that you guys chatted about. So I'm not sure what the process is, but I would certainly personally be very interested in seeing a white paper from the SSC on those emerging problems and equity issues that you guys were discussing. I would certainly invite that if the opportunity presents itself.
Thank you very much. You did. I think you characterized the discussions very well. We have a sort of a narrow bandwidth in terms of our typical commentaries and establishing the basis for scientific advice. But as I said, there are some issues where at least you can identify the underlying science that's consistent with, or you say recommendations that are consistent with the underlying science that generates the overall allocation in the first place. It still remains for policymakers to make the final decisions, but it's simply one that there may be some additional context that can sort of help shape those decisions. So, and as you said, this is all to be determined. So thank you.
Michelle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Paul, for the report. I wasn't able to listen in person, but I did ask Brandon for the recording, so they make for fascinating listening when you're driving around on the highway. So,
well, that's 2 people that have listened probably, and 5 people that have read the report in detail. So thank you.
I guess one thing that I wanted to highlight as part of your discussion was, I think you all talked about the work of the OFL CV work group that the SSC has. And I think one of the, in the potential tasks under the purview of that work group. And I think one of the issues that was raised was, looking at our projections. We had quite a discussion about that at the last council meeting. And, based on what I heard, it sounded like there were some SSC members who were, potentially interested in taking a look at the performance of short-term projections. And of course, this was all, surrounding the Black Sea bass conversation that we had last year. And so, I know that there's been some work done by some SSC members, I think Olaf Jensen in particular, looking more broadly at stuff like that. And so, Mr. Chair, I have a motion that I don't know if it's been shared with staff, but I would like to offer that if possible, but just looking at a motion to, I think given, the information that we saw in August about sort of performance of sea bass projections, and it might be worth taking a more holistic look across, all of our stocks to see how short-term projections are performing, what might be some of the drivers, for that performance, whether it's good or bad. And, I think given the SSC's, recent review of their OFLCV guidance document, they've discussed some of these projection uncertainties. So, I think something like that could be valuable and provide useful information that might be helpful to the 2027 research track projections assessment. So not to step into that assessment, but provide some background that might be useful. So, my motion would be to move to task the SSC to evaluate the performance of short-term projections used to set catch recommendations for mid-Atlantic stocks where available. The evaluation should consider projection assumptions and identify any common patterns, trends, and potential areas of uncertainty. So I think deliberately, sorry, Mary. And I apologize. I thought that this had been sent to you, so I can go back and rephrase. But so it would be moved to task the SSC to evaluate the performance of short-term projections used to set catch recommendations for mid-Atlantic stocks where available, period. The evaluation should consider projection assumptions and identify any common patterns, trends, and potential areas of uncertainty. And so I think I've sort of provided, my rationale before saying this, but again, this would not, the intent is to, I think, complement and provide some background that might be useful leading up to the 2027 research track projections assessment, and I think making sure that the SSC has plenty of time to work this into, their workload over the next couple of years. I would expect that the 2027 research track will probably start ramping up sometime in 2026. So, trying to provide sufficient, this is not a conversation that would be, a one meeting thing. I think the SSC would need, time and resources to, be able to consider this. So, and, try to make this, not so specific to be overly constraining or to, overstep into the work of the research track. So, yeah, there it is.
Thank you, Michelle. We have a motion on the board and seconded by Joe Grist. I think Michelle has given plenty of rationale already. Any further discussion on the motion? Chris Moore.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this answers Anna's question as to how we do things with the SSC. The SSC works for us. council decides that there's an important issue that we want to task them with, we do something like this. So we've done a number of things over the years that are very similar to this. So there's that. The other part of it is your comments, Michelle, highlight my one concern with this, which is we already have this on a schedule for 2027 through the research track assessment. That John can help me with this, but I think that that's already started, right? The work, there hasn't been any work for this. So the question then would be, do we need to integrate this, our SSC activities into the work of the working group that's going to be formed to do that work, or how's all this going to work?
Yeah, I mean, we have not started that research track working group, but my understanding is we're going to be soliciting membership soon for the 2027 research tracks. And so, we certainly wouldn't want the two efforts going in parallel without any connection between them. I'm trying to remember, I don't think there's an exclusion for SSC members on research track working groups. Certainly it wouldn't be the chair of the peer review would not be able to be a member of the working group. But I think one way to think about this is, have one SSC member who's involved in sort of this work for the council also apply to be on the research track working group. So in essence, we're adding more horsepower to that working group by having another group doing some work that could contribute to the research track. So I think we just don't want them running separate. We want them to be connected.
Michelle.
And I guess I would also maybe turn to Paul to perhaps, highlight some of the conversation around this topic that the SSC had, just given the council's general interest. It sounded like there were, several folks who thought that, having some type of evaluation might be a good idea. So, Paul, I don't know if there's anything you can add from the SSC's conversation that I'm missing based on road noise and other interferences in my listening of the recording.
Yeah, well, it can be a driving hazard too if you're listening to some of those parts of the sessions.
That's true.
I think there are some differences, and I agree 100% with John that you don't want two groups of people stumbling over each other trying to do the same thing. The context for the SSC recommendations is slightly different in one sense, in the context that it is focused on the sequence of assumptions that are used for setting up some of the projections. So there's always a terminal year of the assessment, and then there's a bridge year that needs to be assumed, so to speak, in order to get the quota recommendations for the subsequent years. So the 2023 assessment may use the data through 23 or 22. That you have to make some assumption about what happens in 24 with respect to the realized catch, and then you need to take the stock status, the assumed catch, and the consequence for the 25 and 6 projection period. So the focus in our discussions was, how realistic are those setup assumptions, and particularly related to issues of say the variance and precision of and potential overages associated with one sector versus another. So those kinds of things define the forecasting process and are relevant to that very short term issue. As I understand the recommendations that will be forthcoming in terms of reference for the projection research track assessment, it's also has those kinds of issues, but there's also the strategic aspects of it in terms of what methodologies are most appropriate. How can we handle sort of short-term environmental conditions, long-term environmental conditions, and the appropriateness of say what state of nature, say, if you will, is most appropriate, say the short-term recent trends, or do we still rely on the long-term stuff? That are still within the realm of possibility. So I guess there are some differences, and that is, as we get into this, we'd want to be able to refine that so that we don't create a competing system of analyses and so forth, but simply sort of focus on those aspects that are most relevant to the projections that are provided, for short-term advice to the councils.
Michelle.
Thank you for that, Paul. And I guess, I'm thinking we've had, sort of black sea bass projections at one end of the spectrum, and we've had things like Atlantic mackerel projections at the other end of the spectrum. You've got these, one species that's at a very high biomass, another species that's at a very low biomass. And so just thinking about, how those have performed for us. So thinking very much a mid-Atlantic perspective. I mean, it's certainly, the intent of this, again, is not to have anything that is competing, but, hopefully informative for us as council members, and, for the greater scientific enterprise as it moves forward.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think, we have had direct participation in a number of the research track assessments by SSC members in the past, and they have not served as chairs of the panels or anything of that nature. And so it is a possibility, and actually it's essential to avoid recreating the wheel here by the SSC itself. So I think, to the extent sort of refine this to ensure that we, minimize that overlap, that would be appropriate.
Michelle.
So perhaps should there be, some language added to this to indicate that there, should be, minimal overlap with the terms of reference for the 2027 research track? Or I guess I turn to leadership with respect to, generally how refinements to terms of reference for SSC tasking are how that is done.
Yeah. I mean, if I may just offer a quick wording thing, is a coordination with the 2027 research track assessment on projections will be essential. Something of that nature.
Jim Gilmore.
Not on the motion, just a procedural question. So we are going to come back to Dr. Rago on some of the guys, some MREP questions. Just want to make sure we're not going to. Thanks.
Chris Moore.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. As soon as Mary gets settled, we'll add that additional language and see if in fact folks think that's appropriate. So Paul's highlighted exactly what I think we need to do, right, in terms of what we're doing here with this motion and what we expect in 2027. So the way that I look at it is this is informative. So if you just looked at this absent what's going to happen in 27, the output from this would be informative, but it doesn't say this is I don't think it's going to do this. Say this is the best way to do a short-term projection under these circumstances. That is reserved for what's going to happen in the research track assessment in 2027. So I think that's my understanding. That's the way that we're going to manage this, and I think that'll work well.
And thank you, Chris, for clarifying and stating what I could not seem to articulate here. So thank you very much for doing that. And thank you also to Paul for his suggested refinement of this motion.
Yeah, Paul's
Yeah.
going to.
Paul, can you repeat what you said before previously? Mary's here to retype it.
Okay, coordination of this activity with the 2027 research track assessment will be essential. Thank you.
Michelle and Joe, you both good with this? John here.
And just to clarify, 2027 is the date that the peer review will be conducted. The research track working group will be, working well before that to address the terms of reference of that research track.
Any further discussion? Any objection to the motion? Any abstentions to the motion? Motion carries. Thank you, Michelle. Jim Gilmore.
Thanks, Chairman. Question for you, Paul, on the MRIP presentation you got from John. And I was wondering, so if you're not aware, about a year ago, New York attempted to do a fee-based license again, because we're one of the 2 states in the nation that don't have one. And during that process, some of the data we got showed that there was a significant non-compliance, I think, in the intercepts for New York and New Jersey, the 2 states that had free licenses, and on the order of like 70%, which was something alarming. But the other part of it was the other states that do have fee-based licenses, there were some high percentages of non-compliance, not as high as New York and Jersey, but they were still pretty high. And at the time, they said they were going to be looking into that, but that was probably 2021, 22. So I had heard no update on that. And did John discuss any of that? And again, it's possible effect on how we're going to be incorporating that into, because with non-compliance rates that high, that I think raises concern for a whole lot of us about, how accurate that information is. Thanks.
Yeah, that's answer the first part. No, John did not talk about non-compliance. We did talk a little bit about non-response in terms of effort and estimates, the mail-in survey, but not non-compliance or sort of willful rejection of the interview process. I believe in other conversations, there has been some studies that have shown that the compliance is higher when you have a state employee with a uniform will oftentimes encourage more compliance than someone who's may not have convey the same sense of authority with respect to the monitoring of the catch. But no, and I'm certain that the MRIP staff are aware of this problem, but it did not come up during our discussions. The focal point was on the existing study with respect to question order and survey frequency and its potential implications for future catch estimates and subsequently stock assessments.
Any more questions for Paul around the table? Sonny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Paul. My question is on the, excuse me, the public comment on the black sea bass. Could you elaborate on that?
Sure. There were a number of points that were made, and the genesis of the question was, would we be making recommendations or comments on the decisions made by the council and the SMFC at its August meeting? And our response was no. unless we're asked, as Chris identified, commented earlier, we work for the council and generally don't step outside that lane to offer unwanted advice. So, we would respond as part of a tasking or a term of reference. And the other aspect of it was, as I mentioned earlier, is there a scientific basis, or more importantly, or more with a little more specificity here, are there recommendations that are consistent with the assessment models that are used to generate the advice in the first place? So that particular topic is one that needs some investigation if we're going to be able to offer that kind of comment. But at the end of the day, allocation decisions are based on more than simply the consequences of a particular assessment model. And as you and everyone at the council knows, both the economics, the historical precedent, and sort of the social impacts are weigh heavily in all those decisions, and they simply can't be reduced to a singular matter of science.
Did that the wrong way. Your mic's on now.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No, you were good, Paul. It was
Okay.
something
Okay, yeah. I said, boy, I hope I didn't have to repeat all that.
Questions from the audience, Megan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Megan Lab Seafreeze. Yeah, a little bit more of a comment. I'm hoping, Paul, that kind of the questions and the discussion that occurred at the end of the SSC meeting regarding black sea bass and sector issues would be captured in the previous motion to ongoing trends and areas of uncertainty. I know that we've seen in the SSC's report previously that the fact that recreationally we are no longer managing to the RHL, but in many situations setting a recreational harvest target that is significantly higher than the RHL, which has been leading to a lot of uncertainty in recreational harvest and projections. We've had OFL overages in the scup fishery for 3 years in a row. And that's a huge issue. As you had mentioned, with equity issues, we don't have the recreational harvest target in our math problem for when we do allocation. If you look at I know I've sent a letter to the council previously. If you look at, all the charts that staff will show, you start with the OFL and the ABC, and it separates out and stuff like that between the commercial and the recreational sectors. But now, and then the bottom of that are the quotas, the commercial quota and the RHL. Well, now we're not using the RHL as that number anymore that we're targeting. So now all of the allocations are off, and we're actually running into situations where we're exceeding the OFL for many years running, which the SSC has said that if we continue to do this, we're going to have ABC reductions. And that's a huge problem, and that's a source of uncertainty. And it does get back to equity issues. We did a recreational commercial allocation amendment that now we're using a different math problem than what we've used in the past. So those types of things I'm hoping are going to be incorporated into the feedback from the previous motion. And if not, I would request that there be a motion to request from the SSC a white paper, something like what Anna had mentioned earlier, to look at these issues, because I think it's something that we need to have a real discussion about at a management level, because it will affect the stocks and it will affect the sectors. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. You raise a lot of important points, and ones that you and Greg have both eloquently raised at our SSC meetings. So Whether or not they would be, everything would be subsumed into this super white paper, or whether there's a need for sort of a separation of the two, I guess could, it'd be a council decision, but so I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Any more comments or questions for Paul? Seeing none, thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm gassing up the car, so thank you.
Okay. Let's move on to the Northeast Trail Advisory Panel report. Hannah, whenever you are ready.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. Just a quick NTAP update. It's verbal, don't have any slides this go around. So since our last council meeting, the NTAP working group met once, continue our discussions on the industry-based survey. We had a very productive meeting and really got into the potential budget and logistics of a pilot study. The first thing we discussed was potentially changing the name of the industry-based survey, partially because of the unpleasant acronym associated with it. The thought was to change it to a regional trawl survey, but a working group member made a good point that currently in the Senate budget, there is a $3 million line item for an IBS pilot project specifically. So the group agreed changing the name might cause some confusion, and we're continuing to roll with the IBS pilot project. But the main focus of the meeting was really to talk through the logistics and potential budget of a pilot project. Initially, we touched on the main objectives just to make sure we were all on the same page of the goals and the plans for the IBS. So this included a number of things, including providing information and eventually indices of abundance into our stock assessments that are complementary to the bottom trawl survey, to sample in wind farms. As these wind energy areas develop, the Bigelow will not be able to survey within those areas. And so we want to design a project that can sample, outside of the wind farms as well as inside them to really complement the Bigelow and areas and cover areas that it won't be able to get into. And then also to provide a data stream if in the future we were to completely lose the bottom trawl survey. We also discussed a potential timeline. The timeline is very highly dependent on what we move forward with, as well as the funding. So right now, just a reminder, we don't currently have funding for the pilot project. So as we move through this, we're hoping to design something that's really shelf ready so that once funding does become available, we can, hit the water and get things going. At this meeting, we also discussed potentially doing a multi-phase pilot project, something that would initially start off small and serve more as a very basic proof of concept, and then expand into other phases that grow not only in design, but also cost, of course. So under this multi-phase approach, the goal would be to finalize operational plans by the end of this year, so that if funding becomes available, we could hit the ground or hit the water with phase one come spring 2025, and then continue to expand through other phases in fall 2025 and subsequent spring and fall seasons. So looking deeper into this phased approach, the working group discussed for phase one, really leveraging the Durana R and VIM staff, which already has a lot of the gear and equipment that would be required, as well as the knowledge of running these sort of surveys. The thought is that we would conduct about a week-long test survey operations, which could include stations both inside as well as outside of an existing wind farm. And through this phase, the thought is that we'd really prioritize working through some of the uncertainties that we have right now. So this includes using things that we don't usually use on industry platform trawl surveys like MAFMC. So things like the restrictor rope, the day versus nighttime sampling, oceanographic sampling, just to name a few. But there is a broader list in the summary provided in the briefing materials. The estimated budget for this first phase is about $250,000, but as we flush out the details of this phase, that budget could, of course, fluctuate. We also got into discussions of what a potential phase 2 would look like. This could include expanding the pilot survey to say about 2 weeks and could include a second vessel. Again, we talked about leveraging existing vessels and field staff that are already familiar with this sort of work. We discussed possibly using the Bulldog, so that's a vessel up in the New York area. And depending on the scope of this phase, and if during this phase, we'd also like to start purchasing some of the gear and equipment required, the budget could be anywhere of around $2 million. And then lastly, we discussed what a full-scale survey could look like. This conversation was more general compared to the other two, just because, as we continue to work through phase 1 and phase 2, that will help design and fully flush out what a full-scale survey would look like. So lots of discussion, a lot of good back and forth. And then following our industry-based survey discussions, we had a few minutes to talk about the Bigelow contingency plan. So if you recall, this was the original intent of this working group. The Science Center is wrapping up those plans and is shooting to provide a full plan to the NTAP this fall or maybe even this winter. And I think at our last meeting, I also mentioned that there are plans to have a Pisces shakedown cruise next month, so in November. The Pisces, if you recall, is going to be the main Bigelow contingency plan once the Bigelow is out for midlife repairs and things like that. We have another NTAP working group tomorrow from 9 a.m. to noon to continue to flush out these discussions and this phased approach if funding were to become available, because we are on a quick timeline if we do want to get something on the water in spring of next year. So fairly quick update from me, but to pass it back to you, Mr. Chair, if there's any questions.
Thank you, Hannah. Any questions or comments for Hannah? Seeing none, thank you very much, Hannah. And I guess I'll talk to you tomorrow morning on the working group meeting. Let's move on to our executive director's report. Chris Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Behind tab 10, behind tab 12, there's 11 or 12 items that I'm going to quickly reference for this morning's discussion. First document is the 2024 Plan Council meeting topics, a document that you've seen evolve over the year. It's hard to believe, but we're in October, and hopefully everyone realizes that we're having another council meeting October 24th. So on October 24th in the afternoon, beginning at 1 o'clock, we're going to start the discussions relative to those two items, those two bullets there. First one is to approve a final range of alternatives for that REC measure setting process framework addenda. And the second item is going to be taking action, hopefully, with the ASMC board relative to the summer flounder commercial exemption framework. This is being offered virtually, but certainly if there's anybody on the council that's interested in attending in person, we can arrange that. I know that at least one or two of you indicated that they want to go in person, Jim. So which is fine. So hopefully that's on your calendars, and if you have any questions about that, certainly we can talk about it. Following that, our next council meeting is going to be in December. It's going to be in Annapolis at the Westin. There's a long list of things that are going to be included in that meeting. Remember that we've added a couple this week. One was the butterfish issue. The other one was the dogfish issue as well. So both of those will be added to the agenda. But even with that, I'm not sure yet exactly how this is going to play out in terms of our schedule for the week. So stay tuned. And what I'm talking about is whether or not we need to come in on Monday, or this will be like a early morning Tuesday start. So we'll see how it lays out when I put the agenda together. You can actually take one thing off the list, which is that 2025-2029 strategic plan. So that's done. So that won't happen. We're also not sure at this point whether we're going to have that presentation on biological opinion, but certainly we have a placeholder for that. So before I move on, any questions about upcoming meetings, October, December? Okay, seeing none. So for your reference, I think you may have seen this before, is our 2025 council meeting schedule. So you can start planning for that. It gives you the location and the dates. One of the issues that has happened recently and hasn't happened for probably decades is that we have meetings scheduled that overlap with the South Atlantic Council meeting. And I'm not sure exactly how that happened. We had for many years an agreement that said this is the way it's going to work in June. You know, it's going to be New England here, Mid-Atlantic here, South Atlantic here. These are the weeks. So it's like first, second, third week. And that got jumbled up recently. And I think it could be because of the Juneteenth holiday, you know, which is a Friday, and push things up for the South Atlantic Council. Anyway, we're making sure that that doesn't happen again. And so conversations with Kate from New England and John the South Atlantic to make sure that our schedules don't overlap. Because some of you have to be at the South Atlantic Council meeting for the New England Council meeting. So again, we don't want to make it difficult for folks. Anyway, there's the meeting locations as well. You recognize some of those places. That last one, December 2025, is the Madison Hotel, which I'm looking forward to seeing because I've never been to the Madison Hotel. So yeah, Shelley has, and says it's a great place. So looking forward to that. The next item behind the tab is status of council actions under development. Again, detailing the action that we're talking about, the description, the status, and who the staff lead is on that. So good, again, a good reference document. This timeline and status of recent actions relative to things that we've approved. There's 3 on this list. So this is the first one is that Black Sea Bass Commercial State Allocation Amendment. We've actually started moving that, or that started moving through the system this year. Looking forward to having that implemented by January 1 of 2025. The vessel hold capacity framework, same deal, proposed rule closed, I think, the end of August. So that's working its way through the system. And then that framework to reduce the bycatch of Atlantic sturgeon, you see the proposed rule came out middle of August. You can also look at the status, timeline, and current specifications for our fisheries if you're interested in the next item behind the tab. The next item is a memo to me from Kylie updating the East Coast Climate Coordination Group activities. So in that first paragraph, it basically details what that group is. So the East Coast Climate Coordination Group was formed in 2023 to basically oversee implementation of climate-related actions that came out of that scenario planning initiative that we were directly involved with. And this is the leadership from the various organizations on the East Coast. It's responsible for tracking progress, coordinating priorities, estimating the resources that we need to get things done. And of course, and probably most importantly, supporting collaboration and coordination. So that acronym E3CG is probably the worst acronym on the planet. But anyway, that's it. That's what we're using. That's just my personal view. The other thing that I think everyone was or is aware of is the workshop that we had after the August council meeting. That went well. Certainly, you can take a look at what the output was from that. Click on those links that Kylie provided. We do have a meeting scheduled for E3CG at the end of October. Still working on that particular agenda, but yeah, looking forward to that. It's going to be a virtual meeting, so I don't have to go anywhere. Any questions about any of that before we move on? Okay. Next item behind the tab is something that I've talked about a couple times this week already. This is a memo to me from Brandon and Kylie regarding IRA funding status update, basically indicating again what these IRA projects are. You can link to the summaries there. We also have a newly created web page on the website. Look at all the projects there. So you're going to continue to see these updates at every council meeting from now on. And it'll be something similar to what you see in table 1, probably a little bit more than that. But these are all the projects. This is the status. This is when we anticipate that things are going to happen. So as I indicated, we have two initial contracts underway. We have, this says in project number 6, evaluating the data needs and management strategies. That has actually been awarded. And then we have the RFP on the street now for project number 7. So you can take a look at that, see if you have any questions. I'll stop there before we move on in case anyone has any questions about IRA projects. One thing while you're thinking about it is that remember, we're in competition with other councils on these projects. So we are actively getting these RFPs together and getting them out on the street as soon as we can. And we are attracting, a lot of attention, so which is good. The next item behind the tab is something we also talked about this week already, which is the workshop that we held last week. Excellent workshop from a number of perspectives. We will see that workshop report prior to our December council meeting. We'll be making the final decision on that amendment. So the details for the folks that weren't able to listen in are provided there with the agenda and the workshop goals as well. The next item on the tab, just to let you know, the council coordination committee meeting is happening next week. Wes, Mike, and I will be attending that meeting. Starts on the 16th, ends on the 17th. There's a list of items that we'll be talking about. Not listed here is a meeting that the executive directors have scheduled with Janet and Sam the morning of the 16th to talk about all things related to money, budget. So this is an item that we also referenced earlier in the week in terms of our ability to get things done. And the fact that, we're getting level funded, the prices are going up, and our ability to get some of these things done is going to be maybe compromised if we don't start getting a little bit more money. So we'll have that very direct conversation with them, and I'll let you know how it goes. The next item behind the tab is a flyer indicating what MREP is all about, and talking about the workshop scheduled for 2025. If there are folks around the table that have not been involved with MREP, certainly let me or Jason know if you have any questions. And it's really, I really encourage you to be involved and take those workshops if you can. So that's that flyer. The next item behind the tab is something that we rarely talk about, but it's here because I'm a board member of NIFAP. NIFAP is the National Fish Habitat Partnership. I'm on the board. I've been on the board since 2013. A very, very interesting group. There's 20 different partnerships that are involved with NIFAP all over the U.S., including one on the Atlantic coast. They do all kinds of really cool projects. They take a little bit of money and they turn it into a lot of money to get these projects done. And it all has to do with fish habitat. So if you're interested and you want to learn more about it, go to this website and take a look. Last but not least, Burl Self sent us a comment. It said, more closely regulate the Benhaven fishery in Virginia. So with that, and I will elaborate, that's the comment. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'm done. Certainly open up to any questions or comments that the council has.
Yeah, this past winter, I took the MREP program, and it was very informative. If you haven't taken it, it's really interesting. I think you learn more at that than what you do at the council training personally. Any more questions or comments for Chris?
Even though you say that, Mr. Chairman, even though you say that, folks do have to take that training. Yeah. So if you're a new council member, if you're a new council member, you're scheduled to take that training, take it. Because if you don't, I get these calls from NIFs, basically indicating like, what's up? So anyway, thank you.
And I actually got to be the RA for a couple hours. I didn't realize what an easy job that is.
Talking about
Yeah. Anything else for Chris? Thank you very much. Jason?
Thanks. And I would just encourage council members, if or anyone listening, if you know fishermen who are more interested in the process. It's not just, it's really more designed for fishermen to get more involved in the process. So if you know fishermen who might have an interest in kind of learning how to engage in the council process more, I'd really encourage you to either forward some of the MREP materials or put them in touch with me. Thanks.
Thank you, Jason. Scott.
Thanks very much. Yeah, real quick, I just want to encourage that as well. I'm on the MREP steering committee, and I missed the last meeting, unfortunately, because we had an HMS meeting as well. But I've recommended to anybody that I know that's made it onto any of our committees to take the MREP program because it's that rewarding for you.
Seeing no more hands, let's move on to our organizational reports. NOAA Fisheries, Greater Atlantic Regional Fisheries Office. Mike Pendy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a few things to touch on and then take any questions. So first off, and we've talked about this already this week, but on September 30th, we published a temporary rule to extend the spiny dogfish emergency action specifications through the remainder of the 2024 fishing year. But we also implemented an accountability measure to address and pay back an ACL overage from fishing year 2023. We did that so that it would be accounted for already. We wouldn't have to address it in given that there was an expected further reduction in the quotas for next year. And obviously we're still working that out, but that temporary rule is effective November 18th through April 30th. On October 1st, we published the final rule to implement, and Chris just mentioned this, the trigger for the in-season closure accountability measure. It's from Amendment 23 to the Black Sea Bass FMP. Previously, if you recall, the federal FMP required the commercial coastwide closure, in-season closure, once the coastwide quota was projected to be landed at 100%. And the Council in Amendment 23 proposed allowing a 5% buffer, up to 5% buffer, to address the state-by-state allocations and some of the ITQ allocations within the states. So that that's implemented. So we'll obviously be implementing that as recommended for the 2025 specifications. And that's the 2025 specs include the full 5% buffer for that. Effective September 23rd, we closed the blue line tilefish commercial fishery for the remainder of the fishing year, which is through the end of the calendar year. This action was triggered because the blue line commercial landings exceeded 100% of the total allowable landings. We had previously reduced the commercial possession limit in August in an attempt to slow landings and keep the commercial fishery open as long as possible, but they have now exceeded the TAL, and it looks like they've also exceeded the ACL. So there will be an accountability measure for next year that we'll have to take into account and address. On August 29th, we published the final rule implementing specifications for the small mesh multi-species. That's New England Council Plan for the 2024 fishing year, and projected specs for 2025 and 2026. We did further reduce the recommended ABC for southern red hake, which was necessary to comply with the requirements of Framework 62 from the New England Council's Groundfish FMP. And those specs became effective on September 30th. Just a quick update on scallop research set-aside programs. There's a lot of interest in the Mid-Atlantic on that. We received 19 proposals for the 2025 scallop research set-aside funding opportunity. So those proposals are undergoing a technical merit and a scallop management relevance review. And once we conduct those reviews, we do expect to be able to make the awards prior to the start of the 2025 scallop fishing year, which is April 1st. And then Chris mentioned this as well, the biological opinion that we're working on for 8 fishery management plans. We had planned to be sharing a draft of the biological opinion with the councils for discussion and a presentation in December. Our timeline has slipped a bit on that. So we're looking at some new approaches to conduct the analyses in that opinion, including the scope of the proposed action in state waters. For those of you who don't follow the commission passed an action at their August meeting that would basically take the council's measures and incorporate those into state plans. So that changed sort of the baseline for our review a bit. So we're taking that into account. So we can still give you an update on the process if you'd like, and Chris and I can talk about what that would be at the December meeting, but we won't have anything for the council to specifically review or comment on. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman, unless there's any questions.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions for Mike? Seeing none, let's move on to our next agenda item. NOAA Fisheries Northeast Fisheries Science Center, Dr. John Hare.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We are under a continuing resolution through December 20th. So right now that we don't think that's going to impact any of our survey operations. So we are just we're working as planned for this fiscal year. The Atlantic Surf Clam and Ocean Quahog survey was completed in August. 193 tows of the 200 planned using a commercial clam dredger. The survey, Summer Ecomon survey, only part of that survey was completed. The number of days needed to complete a full survey were not allocated through the Office of Marine and Aircraft Operations allocation process, and we lost some days at the beginning because of a crewing issue on the vessel, but we completed 111 of 162 of the planned stations. The 2024 fall bottom trawl survey is underway now. They're about halfway through leg 2. Last I heard, they were working in sort of the Great South Channel region and working north, Georges Bank and Gulf of Maine, and those Georges Bank, Gulf of Maine will be completed during leg 3. In the Mid-Atlantic region, I believe most, if not all, of the stations were completed. There was some weather issues and some minor maintenance issues. The ship had to pull into Norfolk for a day and a half, but that survey is going well. In terms of cooperative research, just as a reminder, the 2025 Cooperative Research Summit will be held in Maine on January 28th, 2025. And registration to participate in that summit is open. Unfortunately, there's a limited number of participants just because of the venue size. So if you are interested, please register. And that date closes November 8th. And I'll send that registration information to Chris so he can share it with all of you. And then the fall pilot hook and line survey is currently underway through November 2024. And just as a reminder, with wind energy development, we talked about it here the first day and came up a little bit today. It's highly unlikely that mobile gear operations are going to be possible in wind energy areas using the large NOAA research vessels or other large vessels. And so there's a number of different ways that we are working to sort of mitigate this. Dr. Rago talked about the review of a number of plans to mitigate. One of those plans is a pilot hook and line survey. So you're not relying on mobile gear, you're relying on hook and line gear to get indices of abundance for fish that are susceptible to hook and line. So that survey has been developed. This is a second sort of iteration of piling it. It's going well, and we are optimistic that this would be something that we could use in the future in wind energy areas and outside of wind energy areas. Northeast Trawl Advisory Panel, we heard the report from Hannah. Thank you very much, Hannah. I'll just move along. In terms of observer, we released our C-Day schedule on May 2nd, and that's the C-Day schedule for the Northeast Fisheries Observer Program. We had a 32% reduction in the amount of C-Days in that schedule, and that is because of the increased cost of the observers contracts and, a sort of reduction in our allocations to support that program. That said, in Q2, April to June, they were 99% successful in accomplishing the scheduled days. And as of the beginning of September, they were 80% successful in the Q3 C-Day schedule. So that, that program is being successful in terms of executing the number of days that, are required under the SBRM amendment. In terms of assessments, we've heard a fair amount about assessments here already this morning. Thank you very much, Dr. Rago. We did have a September management track peer review. Those were all for New England Fisheries Management Council species. And we have a number of research track assessments that are ongoing. Sea scallops, yellowtail flounder, Atlantic herring, longfin squid, and winter flounder are in progress. The 2027 research tracks are going to be monkfish and this projections, a topic-based. There will also be a striped bass research track. The assessment working group is going to be reviewing the terms of reference, the initial terms of reference for those 2027 research tracks. And once those are approved, we'll be going out to solicit members. So that solicitation for membership, where we need to make sure we're coordinating with Mid-Atlantic Council on the projections one, will be out probably in November. So we'll just make sure we get the coordination that we need. And then we have the 2028 research tracks are Acadian redfish and scup, and the sturgeon and silverhakes. And then the 2029 research tracks are a biological reference point, topic-based, and a witch flounder. And I think it's important for all of us to recognize the connection between the projections research track and that biological reference point research track. Because there's three elements that we deal with. There's stock assessments, there are projections, and there are reference points. And all three of those interact in terms of setting catch specifications. So that's, we'll have an opportunity to really go through how we do that as a region, Mid-Atlantic, New England. 2029 seems like a long time away, but it'll be upon us soon. So that's our research track assessment schedule. In terms of offshore wind, Dr. Rago mentioned the peer review of all of our survey-specific wind mitigation plans. We are working to finalize those and hope to have sort of a finalized package before the end of the calendar year with sort of a summary of how we responded to the reviewers' comments. And then we will be, improving and iterating on those plans as we move forward with mitigating our surveys to offshore wind energy development. Ecosystem-based fisheries management. The state of the ecosystem reports are produced annually. There will be, they have a workshop where they get a lot of feedback. I think that workshop is sort of in the first quarter of next year. And so look for more information in terms of participating in that workshop. And we continue to develop ecosystem and socioeconomic profiles as part of the research track process. So working actively on ecosystem socioeconomic profiles for yellowtail flounder, Atlantic herring, longfin squid, Atlantic sea scallop, and American lobsters. And that process will continue as we continue working our way through the research track process. Climate Ecosystem and Fisheries Initiative. Dr. Moore mentioned we had the workshop after the previous Mid-Atlantic Council in Philadelphia. Thank you very much to Chris and Shelley for hosting that workshop and sort of letting us sort of put it on the back end of a Mid-Atlantic Council meeting. As a follow-up to that meeting, we did meet with Chris and Brandon Muffley and Kylie Dancy to talk about the Mid-Atlantic Council specific IRA projects and what are the specific interactions with the Science Center and the Climate Ecosystem Fisheries Initiative. It was an excellent conversation. We'll continue coordinating and making sure that the center is supporting the council on their IRA projects. Last topic, is marine carbon dioxide removal. We put it on our Science Center updates just to make sure that we're touching upon the topic. So we are all aware of potentially developing new industrial use in the ocean. There was an experiment that had been planned by Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution that was going to be held late summer, early fall, this late summer, early fall. They have postponed that to 2025. And then the Science Center, working through the International Council for the Exploration of the Sea, is holding a virtual workshop next week to gather as much information as possible internationally as to the effects of marine carbon dioxide removal on fisheries, fish, shellfish, protected species, whales, sea turtles, to try to get just a synthesis of where we are with our understanding now. And hopefully that will help inform the science that we need to do going forward, but also inform decisions regarding how these activities, if and how these activities are conducted in U.S. and international waters. So we continue to engage in that topic, and I'll continue to provide updates at each council meeting. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll stop and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, John. Any questions for John? Greg?
Yeah, John, real quick, when you were talking about the hook and line, where are you going to be doing that survey basically? And for when is it? I guess you started it already, and how long, and what's the process with that, and the funding and everything, and how you're going to go about it? If you don't mind explaining that a little further.
Yeah, just to provide a little more information. So in fiscal year 2022, the Science Center got an increase in funds to address the issue of offshore wind energy development affecting Northeast Fisheries Science Center surveys. And then in FY23, we got another increase. The increases were not as much as requested. So they're not sufficient to meet all the needs of survey mitigation, but they certainly are appreciated because they let us really start working on survey mitigation. One of the ways to mitigate that was identified very early on is this pilot hook and line survey. They use it on the West Coast for some of their rockfish species. So we took their design roughly, modified it for an East Coast. And then our cooperative research branch held a couple of workshops along the coast to make, improve the design and the plan. And then we worked with Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, moved money to them, and then they're sort of supporting the 5 partner fishing vessels that are participating. There's one vessel working out of Rhode Island, 2 vessels working out of New Jersey, 1 vessel working out of Maryland, 1 vessel working out of Virginia. They have automated jig machines, so the way fishing is occurring is consistent among vessels and across time. And they're going out using these automatic jig machines, catching fish. They're being recorded, measured, similar to a survey. We're not sure if we're going to continue this pilot in 2025, or do we sort of transition it into, okay, we've completed the pilot, let's sort of make this part of the Northeast Fisheries Science Center survey enterprise. That decision will largely depend on funding and sort of some of the results, but the results have been promising. They are able to catch fish. There's a range of species, a species that we would all expect. It does seem to be a good way to get in close into wind energy areas to sample outside of wind energy areas. So it is promising, and we're going to hopefully be able to continue it in the future.
Okay, great.
Are you going to be sampling when obviously the fish kill that we saw earlier in the week and everything? Will you be sampling when they're actually doing the work itself, or so we can get a result? Or
so like a result, that's designed as a survey. It's not designed as an experiment to understand the effects of pile driving on fish behavior and the ability to catch fish. That type of experiment we have been talking about at the Science Center, along with other, more project type approaches that we could use to understand what is the effect of pile driving on fish. But the intent of the survey is, to sort of stand up a long-term survey of fish that can be done using hook and line, not mobile gear. So the purposes are different, but the approach could be used to address, the effects of pile driving on fish. Yes.
Jason?
Thanks. SBRM will take that 30% observer sea day cut and kind of triage it. Do you know among gear types, so it's not always like an even reduction. Do you know what gear types will be bearing the brunt of that observer day reduction?
I don't, but we can sort of get that information from the observer program and, send it to the council for the council to share with all of you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much, John. Let's go to no office of general counsel, John Almeida.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me all right?
Sound fine.
Thanks. Since our last meeting, we received rulings in two cases, I think of particular interest to the council. The Lofstad constitutional case relating to the summer flounder, scup, black sea bass commercial recreational allocation amendment, and the NRDC Natural Resources Defense Council Magnuson-Stevens Act case relating to the harvest control rule framework. NIPS received a favorable ruling in the NRDC case and a mixed ruling in the Lofstad case. I'm going to go into a little more detail with these than my typical case summary, just because I think these are of particular interest to the council. And I'm going to start with the NRDC case. This case challenged the Framework 17 to the summer flounder, scup, black sea bass FMP, which set up the percent change approach for the development of recreational measures. And the plaintiffs in this case also challenged the use of this new approach in the development of the recreational measures for 23, 24, and 25. The overall theme of the plaintiffs' arguments was that the new approach violated the ACL provisions of the Magnuson-Stevens Act. The court rejected the plaintiffs' claims and ruled in favor of NIPS. The court found that the use of recreational ACLs in the specifications process and the corresponding accountability measures for potential recreational overages satisfied Magnuson-Stevens Act's ACL requirements. And the court also found that the development of recreational measures doesn't have to be tethered exclusively to a target of the RHL. The court found that the Harvest Control Rule's goal of reducing fluctuations in management measures struck a balance between the national standard one's dual aims of preventing overfishing and achieving optimal yield on a continuing basis. The court stated that the prior approach before the Harvest Control Rule, which required measures to aim for the RHL every year, balanced these two concepts differently with less of a regard for optimal yield. The main difference between the two approaches is the extent to which recreational measures are adjusted in a given year to bring recreational catch closer to the RHL or to the RHL. The court found that the differences between recreational and commercial fishing and the associated differences in catch data were real, and that the Harvest Control Rule's approach reflects the difficulties with developing recreational measures in light of uncertainties associated with recreational catch data. This decision affirms the approach that the council took with the Harvest Control Rule, which is important as the council and the commission are developing the replacement action, the framework, the recreational measures setting process framework. The harvest control rule that was the subject of this case had a fixed duration, which runs through the end of 2025, at which point it goes away. And the new action under development is intended to replace it. And the approaches of alternatives in the new action are similar to the approach taken in the harvest control rule. So this court's decision provides an important affirmation to what the council is doing with this new action, which is going to be the subject of that joint meeting later this month. All right, now I'm going to turn to the Lofstad case, and you may recall this is the challenge to the recreational commercial allocation amendment. In this case, the plaintiffs argued that the council consists of members who were not appointed consistent with the requirements of the Constitution's appointments clause. And you may also recall that this case only raised this constitutional argument, and it didn't challenge the substance of the amendment under Magnuson or any other statutory basis. It was solely a constitutional case. We received a favorable ruling in the district court, and the plaintiffs pursued an appeal to the Third Circuit. And on September 25th, the Third Circuit issued a decision reversing the district court. However, the way that the court ruled, the amendment itself was not affected, so the allocation formulas established in that amendment remain unchanged. So the plaintiffs in this case argued that council members are officers of the United States, which in the appointments clause context could mean that the council members need to be Senate confirmed or appointed by the president. The linchpin for this is whether an official exercises significant authority. That's the analysis that the court would do when this type of argument is being made. The Third Circuit found that the general council process by which the councils develop actions, provide them to NIMS for approval, disapproval, and rulemaking, like the normal sort of amendment process, does not provide council members with significant authority for purposes of the appointments clause. However, the Third Circuit identified 3 provisions of Magnuson that would represent significant authority. And those provisions relate to specific topics by which the council could prevent the agency from pursuing a secretarial action. The 3 subjects are the delegation of management to a state, the revocation of an FMP, and the creation of a limited access program. So to the extent that the council could use these provisions to prevent a secretarial action in what the court called or described as a pocket veto, then the court found that the council would have significant authority. In light of what it identified as a constitutional problem, the Third Circuit, as its remedy, severed the ability for the council to veto a secretarial action on delegation, revocation, and creation of limited access from the Magnuson-Stevens Act. And where these provisions had nothing to do with the amendment being challenged, the court found that the council's role and actions with the amendment was proper. In essence, the court found that if the council had these powers, then they would have significant authority that implicates the appointments clause. So they took these powers out of the statute, and therefore council members are not officers of the United States, and you don't have the appointments clause concerns. I think the most important takeaway from this case is that the court ruled that the core functions of the council process, the development of actions, the transmittal of the actions to NIMS, and the approval, disapproval, rulemaking process were affirmed by the Third Circuit. The adverse ruling here only relates to a narrow portion of the statute that would provide the council with the ability to stymie a secretarial action on 3 specific subjects. As you probably know, secretarial actions are somewhat rare, and to my knowledge, secretarial actions or even attempted secretarial actions that would revoke an FMP, delegate a fishery to a state, or create a limited access fishery have never happened. So while the Third Circuit ruled that the council doesn't have these authorities anymore, they're pretty narrow and they don't impact 99% of what this council does. I'll also note that the time for requesting additional review in this case has not lapsed. So this might not be the final word in this case. And I will also note that the constitutional issues being raised in this case are being litigated in other courts, in other cases being brought relating to the council process in other courts right now. And one of those cases is in the District of Maine, and I've reported on this case in the past. The New England Fishermen's Stewardship Association raises similar arguments about the constitutionality of the council process in the context of a challenge to the New England Council's Groundfish Framework 65. That case has been fully briefed in the District of Maine for a couple of months, and we recently got word that the court has scheduled oral argument in Portland on October 29th. Right whale litigation, the only update I have is in the Maine Lobstermen's Association case that's now in the First Circuit. You may recall this case challenged the what's described as the wedge rule off the coast of Massachusetts. It's a seasonal closure area off the coast of Massachusetts. The district court ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, and NIMS is appealing that decision. The NIMS filed its opening brief, plaintiffs filed their opposition brief, and NIMS reply brief is due on October 11th. So that's due tomorrow. And that's all I have for this update. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Thank you, John. Peter?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, John. This is Peter Hughes. In regards to the three items that you highlighted that would constitute a pocket veto, does the courts have the authority to remove those from Magnuson, or is that a congressional action that would have to happen in order for those provisions to removed? You know, I was never aware that we had all this power. Ooh, you know, it's just a curiosity question. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting question, Peter, because, you know, this is the Third Circuit. So arguably it only affects, you know, within the Third Circuit. But I think, you know, the court can't, you know, take out an eraser and, you know, the statute is what it says it is. But in terms of how, if this becomes a final decision, how it would be effective in the Third Circuit is, I think we would interpret the statute the way that the court has now described it. So we would interpret the statute in a way that's consistent with the court's ruling.
It was purely out of curiosity, but it's very interesting to see how this works. I mean, removing things from Magnuson through court jurisdiction, whereas I don't know when Magnuson was last updated, what year it was last updated. Can we go to the courts and have stuff added to Magnuson, and then that be the precedent that we rely on, that the courts ruled in this manner? Then, you know, I mean, it seems like a weird standard to me. It's purely out of curiosity. I don't need a response to that, but it's just very interesting.
Yeah, Peter, I'll just say I agree. It's an interesting problem to puzzle over.
Anything else for John? Greg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Just one quick question for John. Good morning, John. It's Greg DiDomenico, Luntz Fisheries.
Hey, Greg.
Did the resolution of the case, the NRDC case, give any advice on what exactly the methodology or policy is regarding what the framework or HCR has to aim for in the context of a species where overfishing is occurring or where a species is currently or is found to be overfished?
I don't think that the decision gave us like a specific, you have to do it this way in this context, but the framework did have different ways to address, the percent change rule was depending on the context of the species and, the biomass of the species, a different result the process is different, right? And the court affirmed the approach of this framework. So I think, we can't get too far ahead of what the court was reviewing, but the court did kind of bless off the approach that was taken here.
Okay, understood. I am waiting for the next draft to understand exactly the difference, because what I'm trying to determine is for a species where overfishing is occurring, I'm assuming the methodology and the action would create an outcome where you'd have to aim more sharply at not going over the RHL versus a situation where overfishing is not occurring. That's really what I'm currently trying to figure out regarding that action. Thank you.
Any more questions for John? Seeing none, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Let's move on to no Office of Law Enforcement. Caleb Gilbert.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
You sound fine. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, council members. Couple points to go over today. There's been no change in our top 2 enforcement priorities within the Northeast Division of Office of Law Enforcement. Those continue to be North Atlantic right whale conservation and our observer program support. Always, we continue to cover all living marine resource conservation objectives in our portfolio. I have a couple points I'll share at the end of my report. That's our report that's outside of our core priorities. And please see the third quarter FY24 written report we prepared to the for the council for this meeting. It's on the council website now. Thanks for posting that up there, Mary, as always. So starting with our right whale enforcement efforts to reduce the number of ship strikes, numerous speed rule investigations are underway on our case processing totals on our right whale conservation priority since 2022 are now up to 89 cases. That's up from 80 cases that I reported at the August meeting. So 9 new cases since the last meeting, bringing the total accumulated assessed penalty amount since 2022 up to almost 1.5 million. On the outreach side of our speed rule enforcement efforts, our investigative support program staff sent out 250 compliance letters last month to new vessels based on AIS data exceeded the 10-knot speed rule. That total number of compliance letters that we've sent out to vessel owners since we began that effort back in 2018 is now close to 2,000 letters. And our ISB staff also continue to set up geofences around confirmed presence of North Atlantic right whales. And on back-to-back weeks at the end of August, based on right whales spotted then, ISP established 2 separate geofences, and combined those 2 geofences resulted in 73 messages getting sent to VMS-equipped vessels to alert them of nearby right whale presence over those 2 weeks. Similar to what I reported at the last meeting, there have been no new speed rule ship strike focused patrol operations since the August meeting. Those efforts will resume at the start of the next SMA season, beginning on November 1st, with the start then of the migratory route and calving ground SMAs. Onto our take reduction plan prong of right whale conservation efforts, as documented on figures 2 and 3 on pages 7 and 8 of our report for the meeting. We participated in multiple take reduction plan focused patrols in the third quarter. OLE and our enforcement partners combined to inspect 513 individual trawls on 63 separate patrol days between April 1st and June 30th. So far in the fourth quarter, just involving OLE, an enforcement officer and special agent conducted a 5-day offshore patrol aboard a contracted platform patrol vessel, inspecting lobster management area 3 lobster gear for compliance with take reduction plan and ACA regulations. That was in the second week of August, and that was the first of 2 planned contracted LMA3 patrols for this summer and fall. 9 trawls of gear were inspected on that patrol, with numerous minor violations detected, and those cases are ongoing. The last take reduction plan related item I'll mention relates to our ongoing efforts to collaborate on the development of ropeless or on-demand fishing. And I realize a lot of this is repeated from my report to the New England Fishery Management Council 2 weeks ago. On September 18th, NED staff collaborated with Maine Marine Patrol and Maine DMR alongside GARFO and Northeast Fisheries Science Center gear research team members to team partners to host and attend a meeting to discuss ropeless fishing in an enforcement context. I can answer questions about the event if folks have them, but I don't have any summary information or notes I can share as of yet from the outcome of the meeting. I can say it was great to engage in dialogue with all the sworn staff in the room that day, from both OLE and MMP, and particularly with MMPs had the opportunity to independently test ropeless gear in the past on platform patrol vessels. And moving forward, the plan is to engage with a joint enforcement agreement, or JEA, or state partners outside of Maine to organize similar workshops with them, probably starting with the New England states. So moving on to our observer priority, our observer liaison special agent conducted enforcement training, as he often does for observers, for a new class of observers at a training event held in late August, early September. He was, with all of those meetings, an active participant in the observer support panel that accompanied all of those trainings now. The training and the support panels help introduce OLE to the observers, cover roles and responsibilities of both observers and fishing vessels, and demonstrate OLE's participation in establishing a culture of safety that supports all observers. We also continue to work with Center Fisheries Monitoring Operations Branch staff to resolve observer-related issues, sometimes that don't rise necessarily to the level of more formal enforcement action. For instance, personally, I spoke to and provided compliance assistance to a couple different vessel owner operators upon request from FMO since the August meeting. Those were related to crew issues and Sea Scallop Observer Program reimbursement. The last item I'll mention related to our observer priority is 2 special agents and a MAFMC officer traveled to Martha's Vineyard last month to attend a trial set at the Edgartown District Court for indecent assault of a federal fisheries observer. The assault occurred during an assigned trip aboard a commercial vessel back in November of 2020. A plea deal was agreed upon, in which the subject pled guilty to a felony for indecent assault and battery charges, and was put on probation and will have to register as a sex offender. A couple of points, as I alluded to before, outside of our core enforcement priorities, related to blue line tile fish enforcement. No new cases have been closed since the August meeting, so I don't have anything new to report case-wise there, but we certainly continue to opportunistically focus enforcement efforts on the blue line tile fish fishery as we're able. Also, a D2 EO, Division 2, and our D2 SEO, and I attended and participated in the 2-day surf clam ocean quahog workshop held last week in Philly, as I know a few council members who were in attendance are aware. We did our best to convey enforcement concerns to the group over changing regulations to allow cage mixing between the two fisheries on individual trips at that meeting. And also, MREP indicated recreational non-compliance came up earlier today. I thought I'd comment on that just briefly. We're aware of related issues in the Mid-Atlantic. I don't think I've personally seen the specific MREP data, but I'm checking with sworn staff, and if they're interested in a need to see that data, I'll make sure I reach out to the appropriate staff to gather that information for them. Last, I'll mention a couple personnel changes within the Northeast Division. We're still operating fairly short-staffed. However, we've recently backfilled our D2 SEO position, as those of you that were in attendance at the Ocean Quahog workshop, Surf Clam workshop last week already know. Congratulations to our D2 SEO, Matt Mousseau, for his promotion. I'm glad that a few of you had the opportunity to meet and engage with Matt at the meeting last week. One of our D1 EO positions is filled now as well. And at headquarters, probably most notably, OLE now has a new director. The director position has been vacant, I think, since January of last year. So former headquarters assistant director James Binnicker is our new OLE director. He served at length as one of the acting directors since the departure of former Director Landon last winter. And that's all I have to report today, Mr. Chairman. I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Caleb. Any questions, comments for Caleb? Jim Gilmore?
Thanks for reports. Jim Gilmore from New York. Just in terms of your follow-up on the MRIP, part of the reason that we believe the 70% noncompliance in New York is because our law enforcement, their estimates are at 20 to 30% compliance. So those numbers match pretty well. So my suggestion was not only with your NOAA folks, but also to talk to the DEC Conservation Police, specifically Lieutenant Sean Riley, who heads up the Marine Enforcement Unit. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Yeah, I passed it along to our sworn staff that work in the New York vicinity. So I'm sure they work very closely with DEC. Thank you.
Sonny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Caleb, for that report. My question is about the speed limit. Is there any kind of protocol or anything when you, like a first-time offender, if they get a warning, or is it you go speed and then you get the ticket? How does that situation figured out?
That's a great question, Sonny. And I don't want to go into too much detail or any detail related to our specific enforcement policies. That's outside of my skill set and knowledge base. But there is some discretion, but I can't speak to that. The law is the law, so it's over 10 knots, 65 foot and above inside the FMA. So if you're doing that, you're vulnerable to receiving the penalty. And I think according to the NOVA penalty schedule, I believe, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn. John maybe can correct me if I'm out of place, but I believe the initial penalties might be $7,500.
So they do give warnings, though, I guess is what I'm asking.
I don't know about warnings. We provide compliance assistance. So, we rely heavily on AIS speed to conduct those enforcement cases. So we're identifying in many instances maybe lower level violations where we've decided that we're providing compliance assistance. Hey, maybe there's not enough evidence to pursue a formal case, but indications are that you were speeding, and that kind of serves as a warning. But I don't want to confuse that with what you might know of a warning, which is a more formal penalty in our violation schedule. So that would formally count as a first offense, whereas getting a letter is less official. I don't know if I characterized that right. A lawyer, please feel free to correct me if I or add to anything I just shared.
All right, thank you. That was real helpful. I get it. Thanks.
Good thing you're under 65 foot, Sonny, because yeah. Any further comments or questions for Caleb? Seeing none, thank you very much, Caleb.
Thank you.
Let's move on to our U.S. Coast Guard report. Lieutenant Commander Joshua Moon, glad to have you at your first meeting here in person.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the 5th Coast Guard District Enforcement Report from August 1st through September 30th of this year. During this period, the 5th Coast Guard law enforcement units conducted 39 fisheries boardings, which was much lower than previous years. The boardings were focused on highly migratory species, mackerel, squid, butterfish, scallop, snapper grouper, surf clam and ocean quahog, tilefish, coastal migratory pelagic, dolphin, wahoo, and herring fisheries. Multiple patrols were conducted in the New York Bight scallop area off of New York and New Jersey due to the increased fishing activity since the 1st of April. Recreational fishing activity has started to increase off the northern region of our district, which is consistent with seasonal trends. For boarding statistics, like I said earlier, we conducted 39 fisheries boardings, which in comparison to the same period of last year, we completed 115. There were 2 fisheries violations for a violation rate of approximately 5%. To summarize those violations, Cutter, Roland Fritsch issued an enforcement action report to a commercial fishing vessel for fishing outside the US EEZ without a high seas permit. The violation was actually withdrawn after the fact. After further discussion with NOAA, the vessel had submitted for a permit and NOAA didn't issue it in a timely manner. On the 23rd of August, Cutter, Roland Fritsch issued an enforcement action report to a commercial fishing vessel for fishing outside the US EEZ without a high seas permit. We have nothing significant to report for marine protected species support or future operations at this time. For our commercial fishing vessel safety efforts, we conducted 67 dockside exams for a total of 415 this fiscal year to date, issued 65 decals, and had 0 commercial fishing vessel safety terminations. There were 3 reported marine casualties during this period for commercial fishing vessels. On the 20th of August, Sector North Carolina received a call that a crab boat was driving in circles near Cedar Island Bay, North Carolina, with no one on board. A Good Samaritan located the person in the water from the vessel and a Coast Guard helicopter hoisted them, brought them to EMS where they were declared deceased by paramedics. A Good Samaritan moored the vessel. On the 30th of August, Sector Delaware Bay received a report that fishing vessel Jersey Cape had experienced an engine failure and were pushed up against the Middle Thoroughfare Bridge. CETO was able to pull the vessel away from the bridge and assisted the vessel to moor in Cape May, New Jersey. The Jersey Cape was able to restart their engines prior to actually mooring in Cape May. And on the 19th of September, Sector North Carolina received a notification that fishing vessel Little Jessie was disabled approximately 6 nautical miles offshore of Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina. The owner was unable to find any local assistance and had lost their generator power as well. A cutter was diverted to tow the vessel to Newport News, Virginia, where they moored the vessel. And for future outreach for commercial fishing vessel safety, District 5 sector units continue outreach efforts through dock walks, training, and educational events. D5 units are currently actively conducting commercial fishing vessel safety training. On the 3rd of August, Sector Virginia commercial fishing vessel staff attended the Cape Charles Coast Guard Appreciation Day to represent commercial fishing vessel safety initiatives. And from our prevention and inspections staff, Mr. David Penlin reported aboard as the new commercial fishing vessel safety program coordinator. That is everything from the Coast Guard 5th District. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Joshua. Peter?
Thank you for your report, Lieutenant Commander. I don't have a question, but what I would like to point out is that during his report, he just gave a couple of examples of fishing vessels that were in distress that had something mechanically go wrong with them. and not in a good way. The Jersey Cape was pushed up against a huge thoroughfare bridge that is a main artery in and out of Cape May. And that could have easily transpired into something much worse than it did. Thankfully CETO was there and was able to get them off pretty quickly without too much damage to the vessel or to the bridge. But now imagine there's a storm and these vessels are out at sea and something happens and you've got wind energy and windmills all over the place. And, just think about that and reflect on that a little bit. These are two boats that weren't one had just left the dock. His engines were running. He was up and going. His crew was there. They've stocked the boat. They're going out on a trip. That boat's fully functioning and ready to go. And then just as he leaves the dock, something tragically happens. He loses steerage. He loses his propulsion. He loses his forward. He lost the linkage between forward and reverse. Just imagine yourself out at sea in incoming nasty, nasty weather and happening in a wind farm that you're trying to traverse through. So just think about that for a little bit. So no question there. Thanks.
Sonny.
Thanks, Peter, for that. And I'd like to add to that too. And we're trying to find out what are the insurance implications of if you break down or run into a wind lease or a windmill.
Anything further for John? Seeing none, thank you very much. Let's move on to our liaison reports. New England Council, Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning again, everybody. So this is the liaison report from the meeting that took place 2 weeks ago up in Gloucester, Massachusetts. They had their election of officers. As we know, Rick Bellavance is elected as their chair. Vice chair is Dan Salerno, whom I don't know that you know, but I've been working with Dan for a little while. He's a very personable individual. And they elected their ex-com. They do their ex-com a little differently than we do down here. Their ex-com consists of John Papalardo, who's a longtime council member, Melanie Griffith, who represents the state of Massachusetts, and Megan Ware, who represents the state of Maine, and that's their executive committee. So we did receive some reports and some updates on wading and skates. We also received, as we received here, reports on NTAP and on-demand fishing gear conflicts. I do have live links in my report where you can find more in-depth information on these topics if you are so inclined. We did receive a Monkfish Committee report. I'm not going to go through that because we went through that yesterday and we passed a similar we mirrored the motion that the New England Council made to work together jointly to send a letter to National Marine Fisheries Service in regards to the RSA and delay in that. We did receive an update on the sea scallop surveys and on Framework 39. The overall survey biomass has decreased from 2023 to 2024, which has been ongoing and a little concerning, but there is a little bit of a silver lining. Biomass on Georges Bank is over 2 times higher than in the Mid-Atlantic, although the biomass in the Mid-Atlantic has bumped up due to new recruitment in the Elephant Trunk and to a lesser extent in the Hudson Canyon. So hopefully those will come into play within the next couple of years. Multiple surveys have documented a large recruitment event in the Nantucket Lightship South area, and Area 1 and Area 2 on Georges Bank both harbor multiple year classes of scallops, which will prove challenging as the council considers how to protect smaller scallops while providing access to larger harvestable scallop that are 5 years old. In regards to the Framework 39, based on the survey results and early feedback, the Scallop Committee, AP, and a Scallop Plan Development Team will be working to develop alternatives for the framework, including options for access area trips and open bottom days at sea. Again, there's a live link in there if you would like additional information. The Groundfish Committee report, and the Groundfish Chairman is with us, and the Chairman of the New England Council is with us. They took action to delineate the various cod stock units in Amendment 25. They have recently, we went from 2 cod stock units, now there's 4 cod stock units. So now they want delineation, and they want to better understand what that looks like. They also took action to create a recreational sub-ACL for Southern New England cod. And they took also measures to revise the scallop accountability measures for Georges Bank yellowtail flounder and northern windowpane flounder under Framework 69. The scallop fishery accountability measure would only get triggered if the scallop fishery sub-ACL is exceeded for the stock and the overall ACL is exceeded for Georges Bank yellowtail or northern windowpane flounder. So basically, in a sense, that the scallops get a very small piece of the ACL. Scallop fishery has taken place out in Georges Bank. That is, there's a lot of yellowtail there, but the surveys tell us there's not a lot of yellowtail there. And the scallop fishery exceeds its ACL, and has done so for a couple of years now. So basically, they're looking at the whole ACL, groundfish fleet and scallop ACL, and combining it as one. And as long as the scallop fleet doesn't exceed the overall ACL for the fisheries, then it's not considered. I don't know how it's going to be taken into consideration in the future just yet. But they also took action to summarize cod data and provide individual sector bases on recent observer at-sea monitoring data. They conclude they'd like to see hotspot heat maps of cod catch by year, by month, by sector, by 10-minute squares and 30-minute squares for fishing year 2021 to the most recent, and provide that to sectors before the 2025 roster deadline. The herring committee, herring and mackerel, they're in a similar situation. They're not really, they're very susceptible to climate, I guess, and they're shifting stocks or moving stocks, and they're having struggles with the herring up there like we are with mackerel down here. It's not really overfishing, but that's kind of the only thing that we have to call it right now. But they took action to reduce the 2025 herring specifications consistent with the SSC's recommendation of an OFL of 18,273 metric tons and an ABC of 6,741 metric tons for fishing year 2025, and with the following guidance: that the management uncertainty buffer is the most recent 10-year average catch totals from the Canadian New Brunswick weir fishery of 4,031 metric tons for 2014 to 2023. That amount will be subtracted from the ABC to produce the ACL. So off of the 6,741 metric tons, remove 4,000 metric tons from there, and that's the ACL for the fishery. Maintain a sub-ACL for the herring management areas based on the same proportions as to the last specifications. Area 1A equals 28.9%, 1B 4.3%, 2 is 27.8%, area 3 would be 39%. And maintain the fixed year set aside at 30 metric tons. So, their herring fishery is not looking, they have their challenges with herring as we're having our challenges with mackerel down here. And again, there's a live link in there if anybody would like additional information. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Any questions for Peter? Seeing none, thank you very much. Let's go on to our South Atlantic Council liaison report. Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wow, a lot of time left, so I guess under Wes's instruction, I'll drag this out till 1 if I can. We met in September in Charleston. One of our big topics, of course, was red snapper. That's kind of leads a lot of our discussions. We currently have 3 red snapper lawsuits that are currently under litigation. One lawsuit alleged that that we violated the MSA and the Administrative Procedures Act by failing to address overfishing of the red snapper. A settlement agreement was actually reached back in August and stated that that NOAA Fisheries will complete and submit a recreation or secretarial amendment. And the final rule needs to be submitted to the Federal Register by June of 2025. Not a lot of time. The council will be able to comment prior to the amendment, and there will also be opportunities for public comment. Again, there's not a lot of time for them to get this done, so this really highlights the problems that our council has experienced with this species. It's very unfortunate that it has come down to a secretarial amendment, but that is what it's played out. We also initiated work on an amendment to address the shortcomings of our Southeast for Hire integrated electronic reporting, or CFIRE program. This was focusing on recommendations from CIRO and the Southeast Fisheries Science Center, as well as considerations being explored by the Gulf of Mexico Fishery Council, which experienced some problems with their reporting system as well. During our September meeting, we noted that the agency had informed us that they cannot validate our for-hire logbook until our compliance improves. Imagine that. So we requested additional feedback from the agency as to what level of compliance would be necessary for this validation to take place, and for data to be subsequently used in management. We then modified our draft purpose statement for developing this amendment to include gathering of economic data for our for-hire industry. We also requested additional information, including details on the process of approving landing locations and how this was done in the Gulf of Mexico, the importance of these landing locations to data validation, and how this approval process of these locations would function for vessels holding permits in more than one region or operating outside of our region. Clarification also on incongruent requirements for our did not fish reports, among other regions, and an example of what a validation survey and how one would be administered in the South Atlantic. It was also noted that CIRO is developing a new reporting platform that is intended to be a one-stop reporting. Hopefully that will be the case. The data collected through this application would continue to go through ACCSP. CIRO intends to beta test this application with fishermen and conduct outreach. Another project involves the creation of a permit registry, which we think is very important. Both projects intend to ease the burden of stakeholders as well as the agency. We've requested to be kept informed of the outreach and education plans for these projects. Additionally, the council is requesting a presentation from HMS on their recently proposed rule for electronic reporting requirements. We also initiated work on a coral amendment 11 and shrimp amendment 12, which is now kind of a joint amendment. This is going to allow for rock shrimp fishery to move back into an area that was historically their fishery to begin with. It's currently encompassed within the Oculana Bank coral habitat area of particular concern. It was never intended to be in that HAPC when it was put in place through our original Amendment 8, but it was submitted without a modification, so it was kept in there. And we are attempting to reestablish access to this fishery. We attempted it through Coral Amendment 10. However, that amendment was disapproved because it did not describe how opening this area would minimize the effects of fishing on the EFH, and did not meet the goals and objectives of the fishery management plan, as well as it did not address bycatch. So to address these issues, we started work on a joint shrimping and coral amendment plan to create access back in this HAPC. This kind of highlights the difficulties of removing an area from a fishery and then trying to get it back. I won't go into too much of the MRIP stuff. We have been following along as everybody is, with patiently waiting for the outcome of this new design and how that's going to affect our amendments going forward. A couple of snapper grouper amendments that we're working on. We have finished an amendment 36 that's going to allows for our new stowage requirements for transiting black sea bass pots with the new ropeless on-demand gear, which everybody, all the black sea bass guys in the South Atlantic are really looking forward to that. That's going to be a big help for everybody. We also had a new assessment for our scamp grouper, which is not doing well. There were some difficulties in identifying the difference between a scamp and a yellowmouth grouper. So we created a new complex that groups these two together. And along with that, we adopted a status determination criteria, rebuilding plan, catch level recommendations, sector allocations, and accountability measures for this new complex. And as well as had to reorganize the shallow water grouper complex, which the yellowmouth was pulled out of. Our next, I guess, problem child is our black sea bass. It's headed the same way as our red snapper. We had a new assessment, CDR 76. It indicated that the stock is depleted. We received a letter from NOAA back in May indicating that black sea bass will be continued listed as not overfished and not overfishing. And this was from the previous assessment, CDR 56, which kind of reverted back to the difference in using a proxy of 30% compared to a proxy of 40%. I think that's going to be that's going to be worked out. Let's see. The SSC is going to review some additional projections at their October 24th meeting. The council discussed a list of potential management actions and expected changes to fishing behavior in response to those potential changes. We'll also address management of black sea bass incrementally. First, new biological reference points, catch limits once we have those from the SSC. And other measures, sector allocations, management, and accountability measures will be adopted through this new amendment 56. A framework amendment will be used to put in place this rebuilding plan. I personally don't have a real good feeling about CDR 76 at all. I do look forward to the SSC's additional review and at their October meeting and further discussions of possibly even a regime shift of our black sea bass. Again, like I said, I don't have a whole lot of comfort level in that CDR 76 right now. And I know for a fact that that assessment did not take into consideration the fact that Wes and Sonny are wooing these black sea bass with their waves north and giving them free boat rides. In fact, you may have eaten some of them last night, especially the ones that tasted just a little bit better. So again, thank you for allowing me to come here. That's all I've got for you. Again, enjoyed the hospitality as usual. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Tim. Any questions or comments for Tim? As long as we don't woo the red snapper up here, we're good.
You're welcome to them. In fact, Sonny told me the triggerfish are moving this way and the red snapper aren't far behind.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you very much. Do we have any other business? General public comment? Chris Moore?
So we have leftover food from yesterday's party. There's a lot of lobster rolls in the back. There's some napkins, plates, I think some aluminum foil. So grab one or two of those lobster rolls and take them with you or eat them here. But certainly you're welcome to do that so that we don't have to drag them back to Dover, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Or
Dagsboro, right? Yeah. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Seeing nothing else. Thank you guys very much. And I guess we'll kind of be semi back together on the 24th. And we'll see everybody in Annapolis in the